Hello and welcome, everybody. Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Hey, Sarah. Hey, Emerson.
Hey,
So happy to have all of you. And this is a topic that I think we really spoke a lot about in the community with feedback. If this is interesting, and a lot of people came back with this is something very, very interesting for them. So I'm so happy to have put together this panel and very interesting conversation to follow. Um, Let us know in the chat if everybody can hear us and see us loud and clear. If from a tech perspective, we are all set. I can see people are responding where you're joining us from.
We've got
Perfect.
a real global group. I've seen South Africa, Argentina, India. In London, we've got a pretty global group. So welcome, everybody.
Okay,
Belgium.
perfect. I get a yes
Nice,
from
Israel too.
I got a yes from Paul confirming that they can hear the sound and everything is good. Perfect. So, welcome to big welcome to everybody joining us from all over the world. I think it's night somewhere, early morning somewhere, middle of the day. So, super nice. Thank you so much for joining us at all the hours. My name is Pragya. I'm the head of marketing for RevGenius. And today we have an amazing session moderated by Lisa Kelly here, who this panel is going to talk about how does one grow their career in RevOps. It's a very interesting topic because there's a lot of cross-functional people coming into RevOps, moving out of RevOps. So then what are the ways that you can actually deal with this? Without me saying much, I'm going to pass the mic over to Lisa and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Pragya. Well, for those of you that haven't, please drop it in the chat where you're from. And then to Pragya's point about the fact that RevOps is coming from all these different places and departments within organizations, I'd love to hear what department you guys are in. So let us know, if you come from finance, RevOps, sales, marketing, wherever you're from, because I think that what you'll learn today is that there's no shortage of pathways into RevOps, and growing your career can come in a lot of different flavors. So I think, as most of you will likely know, is RevOps is currently the fastest growing job in the US, according to the recent jobs analysis report from LinkedIn. I apologize for not having global data now, knowing how global our group is, but I can imagine that RevOps is, carrying kind of a similar integral role in growth within organizations. So compared to other corporate functions that you'd find in an organization, RevOps is a fairly new field. And so I think that there's a lot of discussion around what is RevOps, how do I get into it, and what pathways can I take. So we're looking forward today to talking about how to grow your career in RevOps. And we're going to start off with going around the group and talking about our backgrounds and how we got to where we are today. So I'm going to start with Emerson. Emerson, will you please give us a background and walk us through how you got to where you are?
Yeah. So currently, I'm director of revenue operations at Alert. My career, a long time I was in social service, nonprofit, the nonprofit world. Started out, direct service, and then moving into fundraising and development, and then into operations, and eventually running my own nonprofit, homeless shelter for at-risk youth. And at some point, I love the work. And at some point, though, I think I realized there wasn't a lot of money. And as I wanted to have a family, I needed to look at a different career path. And there was some other stuff kind of going on at the time that it just made sense to make a switch. I decided that tech sales was the right path for me. And, I spent some time kind of learning about sales and just the type of person I am, like the science of sales, because I knew when I got into sales, I wanted to make sure that I was able to quickly be successful. And so I really learned about like the systems, and I was able to apply some systems to, just my day-to-day, cold calling, email campaigns. I was able to see some success there, move up into an account executive role. I moved on to a large company. I think that the thing that really kind of pushed me into a RevOps role, I moved to a new company, and a lot of the systems that I had built for myself that made me successful at maybe a smaller stage, a startup, mid-range company, I wasn't really able to customize my systems at this larger, like monolithic corporation. And so I really started to have to find, I built a shadow CRM for myself. I know I'm not supposed to do that. And in RevOps, I don't advocate for it, but I had to build systems that worked for me. And I was able to see success with these systems. Ended up using HubSpot and built my own little, like I say, little shadow CRM. I was able to see some success there. And then I started having other AEs like, hey, what are you doing to be so successful? I showed them what I was doing. And then they're like, hey, will you build me something like this? So I started doing that for other sales folks and realized at some point, like, this is really what I want to do. I'd rather do this than, be in an independent contributor role. So I studied up and made the jump and got a job at a startup in revenue operations and just built from there.
Awesome. That sales background, I think it's one of those things that shows that some of that sales operations, like operationalizing your desk as a seller, is something that comes kind of instinctual a lot of times to some of the operations professionals. I've got to put organization to this to create a system around it. So, Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, great. So hi guys, so good to be here. I love that we have such a global crowd here. I've been in sales for 22 years now. Started out as an individual contributor, have worked my way from that type of role through startups and a lot of SaaS companies the last 13 years, where I went from IC to moving over to sort of cross-functional. So I have a few roles that I created myself, where I got hired or headhunted for, where I worked behind the stage to help customer success, sales, and marketing to align on how to work together, which is pre-RevOps being a thing, because this is a few years back. And I think I've been training sales people and marketing people for a long time when it comes to like being on stage talking about cross-functional work between sales and marketing and success. And I think that the RevOps sort of, we're calling it a new type of space, but it's not really, because it sort of comes from the space where customer needs are not being met. We need to meet them, and we need to use smart tech and get a solution-oriented way of working. And I think, again, I've been doing this both in the IC roles, because I can't help myself, behind the stage of companies. And I've been focusing hard on SaaS, because that's a space where growth is fast and you need to build and rebuild in a very high pace, which I love a lot. And now I'm in a role as a CRO of my own funded company that I have with my partner. And we are doing 2 different companies at the moment. So we're scaling both a consultancy house and a skills training app, which I am CRO for both. So I think that working the way I have done, because I've always been sort of fluent between sales and marketing and success, because of how I see the process and the world. And I've also always been a very interested techie person. So all the systems, and I've also worked in a lot of SaaS companies that have had sales systems to sell. So marketing automation, CRM, sequencing tools, that type of thing, prospecting tools. I've been in the sales enablement space for a while when it comes to what I have been selling and implementing. So yeah, I have a, this is very exciting for me, this session.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Great background. I think, again, I think there's more, like, the point is while we both, well, I should say all 3 of us, and I'll tell you that in a minute, all 3 of us have a bit of a sales background, but I've seen a lot of people come from other areas that enter revenue operations. So I'll give you a quick background on me. We were talking about this before we started the session. My background's a little bit, unusual in the fact that I put myself through college in sales, but then I decided I was going to be a molecular biologist. So I became a molecular biologist, and then decided to go back to sales, and was in staffing sales for several years in leadership and running some of the talent acquisition side of things, as well as medical staffing. And then I took a sabbatical and saw all these cool digital nomads sitting in cafes in places like Bali and Singapore, and just having the time of their lives, working from cafes. And then I came back in the country and said, I'm getting in the software industry. So I moved in. My first role in the software industry I was running a BDR team. And I, much like Emerson, I saw the need for structure, and I saw the need for being able to put some really strong systems around around the team. And then they moved me into an enablement position. And then within 6 months, they came to me and said, we want you to run operations. And my first response was, well, I don't know what it is, but I'll figure it out, I guess. And so, I did. I figured it out, but it was true sales operations. Ultimately, I reported to the head of sales, and we were running sales operations. But over the subsequent years, years, I started reaching across the aisle to CS and reaching across to marketing and making sure that we were very tightly paired in our handoffs and our thinking about the customer lifecycle. So when I made my next job change, when I went over to talk, I actually insisted that I own customer success operations, sales operations, marketing operations. And I ended up adopting some other teams like product operations and legal. And that was an adventure in itself. From there, I've been working in revenue operations in a variety of organizations in both fractional positions, full-time positions, and then as well as a consultant. And I've been consulting for the last several years. And once in a while, I'll jump in with both feet into a company and be a full-time role for a bit. But it's been really interesting as a consultant because you start to see the patterns of different problems that happen at various sizes of companies. Because I've worked all the way from we have 10 customer startups all the way up to $6 billion companies. And you find that a lot of the underlying foundational issues can be the same, but they manifest very differently. So I think that's something where revenue operations is really being able to identify the optimizations within an organization and put that in place. So, so I'm going to go over to Emerson again and really ask you, how did you grow your career within RevOps? How did you get to that next step and that next step? What was it that you proactively did to grow?
Yeah. So for me, like it's a lot of like background research, and I built a strategic plan, of how I'm going to move into RevOps, just based, coming from a nonprofit background. Like, how do I really tease out the transferable skills, and then how do I pitch that? Because I knew I was going to have to come in really at like the ground floor and prove to someone that I knew what I was doing, because I didn't necessarily have the resume. But from all of the readings that I did and all of the self-education that I did, which was really honestly a big part of what I love about RevOps is the continual education. But how do I convince somebody that I know what I'm doing? I made the choice to move into the startup world. I knew that that's probably the most likely place that someone's going to give me a shot. It's going to be kind of fast and loose, and I think it's a lot of people who are coming together who don't necessarily know what they're doing, but willing to take on the challenge. And that's where I was at the time. So, funnily enough, I wrote out this strategic plan, and it just so happened, when I completed my plan, I went on RevGenius, and I happened to see someone post that they were looking to create a job description for a RevOps role, and they don't really know what they want. They just know they need it. And I messaged them and said, hey, like, let's build this together. Like, don't worry about writing a job description. Like, let's get in there and figure out what needs to be done. And then from there, it was really like a lot of learning. I think a big piece to me was quickly another shout out to RevGenius. I got a mentor who reached out to me and said, hey, I've got some extra space and would love to, help you develop your career. And that was huge for me because when you're trying to learn all of this stuff on your own, you don't exactly know what to focus on. And you can waste a lot of time and energy chasing a rabbit down some pathway that's not the right pathway. So it really allowed me to focus on what the organization needed, how to set up the foundational systems, and really focus on, the customer lifecycle stages, the foundations of revenue operations. And then from there, it was just a lot of self-education, I developed relationships within the community and had support, in multiple forums. RevGenius is just one of them, but and I think, it was a lot of, I teach classes on, data analysis and using ChatGPT to write Python code to simplify some of and automate some of RevOps systems. And so I think that like forcing myself to learn enough to be able to teach it was huge as well. And then you get your face and your name out there as well. And then you start, and then, you have people reaching out to you with job offers and everything. And, and then it's a nice place to be. So.
It is.
That sounded so structured too. Like you had a plan and you wrote it out. I am so different from that. I had no plan. I got bored and I realized I can't be in IC roles anymore. What should I do now? Because I don't want to be a sales leader. That was basically my plan. So it's very structured.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to that point, Sarah, what was it that you in looking back, right? Because you said you didn't have necessarily a concrete plan, but in looking back, what has helped you progress in your
No, but I
career?
think there's a few things, because the thing is, one of the things that I noticed, because I actually loved the IC role for a very long time. And I've been in all types of roles within that, from SDR and meeting booker to AE and senior AE and enterprise AE and all of the things, right? And then I didn't want to go into leadership because I am more of a process person than a people person. I'm very red, I'm very straightforward, I'm very abrasive. That's what people would say, at least. I think I'm just direct and clear, but So I didn't want to go into leadership because I didn't want to manage a team of ICs. That wasn't one of my goals, right? So once I realized that I have gone to the edge of where I can go in the IC role now, like I've done all the things. So what is my next step? That's when I started creating my own work description. So I basically made my own role. Then I went out to a few companies, and this is again pre-RevOps being a thing. I went out to 3 companies that I knew before that I liked the culture in, and I said, I think you guys will need this, because most of them, all 3 companies, were at the startup to scale up journey, right? So they started feeling all the pains of being like 180 people. How are we going to manage RevOps? How are we going to do this? But they didn't use those words. Again, this was a while ago. So I created my own role description. I went out to these 3 companies that I knew, and I said, you guys are going to need this role. These are the projects I want to run, which are RevOps projects. If we look at it, what is defined as today, when it comes to aligning and making sure that we have system support, that we have the education that's needed in the groups to be able to perform their job well, and that we have an alignment within the organization, right? And then I got all those 3 offers accepted. I chose one of them. And then once I came backstage to start doing that work, I realized, oh, this is so much fun, right? This is so much fun because I can actually help all the people in these groups to deliver better at what they're doing, which really excites me. And then when it comes to the second recommendation I would have, besides doing that, because that's a really good tip, by the way, is train yourself. I think I spend 2 hours a day just reading, listening to YouTube, and teaching myself things. Like it's an ongoing thing that I do, and that I've done forever. Thirdly, understand systems, the magic of systems. Understand how to build a really, really cool tech stack, and understand how to analyze the data, and read and educate yourself if you don't know how to do that. Then it's pretty easy to sort of move into a RevOps role, because most people don't have the skill sets today and don't have the urgency to learn as I do, and it sounded like Amazon did the same. We need to consume and learn a lot. And when you do that ongoingly on a daily basis, it will be easy to go to a manager in your company or go to a new company and say, look, I know all of these things. Do you have any people internally who does this? Because you need this role. But again, the assertiveness helps to get those jobs. So going into and I wouldn't recommend normally going into a junior role in a bigger company. I would recommend going into a startup like Emerson did. Because there you can form the viewpoints of what this role should be on your own together with the team, and then you can build it out.
Okay, we had a little bit of a technical glitch there, Sarah, but we think we heard you. I will say I am also very much that red type, that direct type of person, and I think I'll just touch on this really briefly and then jump to the next question, but. From a growth in my career, I think being really direct and being able to deliver a message without that emotion necessarily behind it, saying this is what the data is telling me and this is what I think we should do about it, I think is an important thing to come at, because a lot of times, when you're talking about the black and white, so let's talk about the sales and marketing can often be pointing fingers at each other, right? Sales is like, you're not giving us enough leads, and marketing's, you're not treating every lead like the precious gem it is. And you need to be able to shine a light on the actual facts without it being an attack on one team or, a defensive maneuver on another team. As an operations person, you just need to have a really clear conversation about these are the facts, right? Marketing's leads are a little bit down. However, we haven't been following up as we needed to on the leads that we have received, right? And being able to say that without it being accusatory, this is a problem we need to solve. And so I think that some of that has been helpful.
I think also our job is to educate the teams to understand how it's not a personal attack. So we need to educate them too. So this is, we don't put any emotion related to this. Has nothing to do with you as a person, right? This requires some education to move both teams to a place where they look at data as the God-given scent it is from the universe, because it is. And then when they receive data, they're like, great, this is how I improve. Because working in sales and training so many salespeople in my days, I think that getting the salesperson, and this is it's the same aspect, getting the salesperson to understand that the data in your CRM and my feedback is to improve you. And when you get everyone aligned on that message, this is to improve us, then somehow it's a guiding like vessel. It's not critique. Right. It is a guiding way of getting us to a place where we deliver better and where everyone feels really good about what they're doing on a week-to-week basis. So our job is also to educate.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's that focus of saying, I'm here to identify opportunities, not to identify problems. Yes. So I want to talk a little bit about the different paths that people can take into revenue operations, because, all three of us here have a sales background, but that is not the only pathway. And I've had some really successful revenue operations leaders in my network that have come from very different backgrounds. I'll give a couple examples. The person who I trained to take my position, I gave a 1-year notice to InContact when I left because I wanted to take my sabbatical. So I had the opportunity to train up my replacement, and I grabbed a VP of finance because he understood the sales process. He understood, and it wasn't just that he wasn't just a finance guy living in spreadsheets. He actually lived in the real world. He'd had experience working with the deal desk. He'd had experience working on pricing configuration. He helped staff and understand the CS organization. So when I brought him down, he was highly successful for several years with a finance background because he understood not just the data analytics, but he trained himself up on the systems and the technology that he didn't necessarily know. So I think the point here is, with a sales background, you have a shopping list of things that you need to learn to be successful in revenue operations. Same with a finance background, they just might be slightly different. And then the other one that I've seen happen is a technology background. So you might have a Salesforce admin or Salesforce developer that wants to actually get more involved in the strategy or the direction of a company. So I think that's another background where I've seen people be successful. Sarah, I'll open up to you, and then Emerson as well. Have you seen any other types of backgrounds where people have been very successful in revenue operations?
I've actually seen from all types of previous jobs, because I think that there are some core skills or core things you can develop to be good at this job. So when you come from an analytical background or a system background, which is sort of in the same ballpark, you need to develop understanding for the business and the reality if you don't already have it. But I think being a very proactive finance leader, as an example, proactive in the business, will lead you to a good place when it comes to RevOps. Also coming from a situation where you've been working a lot behind the stage, so running departments or running strategic initiatives behind the stages will lead you to be good at RevOps. But there are things that has to do with understanding technology and data that you sort of need to get, because otherwise, if you're not acquiring that knowledge, it's going to be hard to do this role well. So I don't think that sales, because my experience of sales is not that we're great at technology. My experience of sales is that we are sort of looking at technology as something that is a painful thing to do, because we're coming from like CRM is a admin tool type of viewpoint. So I think that people who work in marketing, who are very skilled in marketing automation tools and data related to being able to prove why the fuck they're there, that I think is a good background. So most of the people that I've met that's really successful comes from marketing tech, like understanding marketing technology and understand how to leverage that, because they do everything in communication online often, and they are dependent on data. So they need to know their stuff.
Yeah. What about you, Emerson? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing about RevOps is it touches so many different departments, so many different skills you need to bring to the table. And so it's really, any background that you bring can really enrich, but it's also going to flavor how you execute RevOps. And I do I think probably my personal favorite, other than maybe sales, and I'm biased to that, but it is that finance background, because it's understanding like the bigger picture, the end goal, and how everything gets there. Also, another one though is a CS background. Mm-hmm. Someone who's really focused on the customer journey. You can really, just have a nice holistic, kind of wholesome, I guess, kind of bend on RevOps. And and I think no matter where you come from, you're going to have to learn to fill in the gaps. marketing is one of my kind of like blind spots. Like I have to really put in a lot of effort to understand that top of funnel. I understand the sales, once the opportunity is created, like I got it, I'm good. But yeah, have it. And then my social service background helps with the CS part. But yeah, I think that's the lovely thing about RevOps is you can really have like different flavors of it, and depending on what the business needs, different backgrounds.
Yeah, I will say I have one of the people in my network that immediately came to mind. She's been doing CS and implementation operations for years, and she is quite possibly the most brilliant RevOps mind because she understands the full cycle. Yeah. And I will say for me, Emerson, my background, same thing, like marketing was this really big blind spot, but I was in a position where the CMO left. And I inherited marketing for about a 6-month period while they identified a new CMO. And it was the most eye-opening experience of my career. And so when I was in sales operations and I had the marketing team and sitting in that room and understanding the languages that they speak, the technologies that they use, and how vastly different they look at the pipeline was so educational for me. And I think that I would attribute that to being one of the biggest incremental steps in my career in understanding the full customer lifecycle. So CS, I think, is something that sales, it's really easy to look down the road and say, okay, what happens after implementation? And then we've got renewal and upsell motions. But when it comes to like before that lead showed up, when we're talking about events, we're talking about demand gen, I think that is not instinctually comes to someone with a background in sales.
Yep.
No, but I also think based on that part, because I spent 4 years at a marketing agency and working in both as head of revenue, and I was also doing consultancy for the sales and marketing alignment for the customers. And we delivered a lot of marketing content and a lot of inbound marketing and that type of delivery, and understanding these things. And this you can, so look, the people in the audience, because now we're looking at how to advance a career into RevOps, right? That's the whole point of this conversation. I think that shadowing one of your marketing team members in your current company today, shadowing them for a day, sitting in on all the meetings, like take a day off and do that instead, will help you with the eye-opening. You got 6 months, Lisa, to sort of try to replace the CMO. So you got a lot of in-depth knowledge, but this will open up, if you do a day, it will open up a lot of questions that you can then Google and look at YouTube for to understand, like, what does this mean? Just sit there and write down everything that you don't understand and then educate yourself on that. And I think it's the same for whatever blind spot you have, because for me, that brought me into a hybrid place, right? To do marketing and delivery that way. It brought me to a hybrid where sales is just one part, because our customer journey is so extensive. And we know this slim part if we come from sales. If we come from marketing, we know this slim part. So we need to broaden ourselves up, because once you do and you go into the RevOps role, the freedom is immense, right? You have so much freedom to do whatever you want with your career, because you can go into consultancy like Lisa done, and I've done that too, or you can stay in RevOps operations and start rebuilding out what you want to deliver in the company. Like, you get a lot of freedom if you widen up a bit and understand more aspects of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say for those of you looking for a place to start to learn on the marketing side, I say start with demand gen. Start by understanding your demand gen engine, because that's one of the major places where there's overlap between sales and marketing. So, so if you are today specialized in sales ops or marketing ops or service ops, what would you suggest expanding to prepare yourself for a true RevOps role? Sarah, you touched on the fact that, like, hey, find a buddy in marketing and follow them. Yeah. What else can we do to maybe expand our roles within revenue operations?
So mentorship, find a mentor for your blind spots. Again, I think we're coming back to sort of identifying. So first you need to identify what blind spots you have. And then you need to find mentors or shadow or do things to get that competence up. And then when it comes to the next step, is to look at your own organization that you're in now. Is there a spot open here? Do they not have RevOps yet? Because the easiest way of you moving would be to move within your company that you're in, right? To move into that role. But then you have to have the balls to take a role if it doesn't exist and build a team, right? And that's a bit scary. So it sort of depends on how junior or senior you are. But mentorship, learning, understanding your blind spot, and then shadowing and getting access to that information, I think is super important. And then you need to ask for the job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and besides even the getting the actual role or position, one thing I would add is that I typically started by reaching across and offering to help. How can I help you? Because oftentimes marketing ops and service operations or CS operations tend to not have the resources that sales operations often has. So sometimes just offering to help and getting to understand their world really opens up that pathway for learning. And whether you are able to get that role within your current organization or a future organization, I think it's important to be able to speak to an understanding of those other departments. And again, for sales operations, I had one of a person who was in CS operations come to me one day, sit in my office and say, how can I learn? I want to learn, give me a project. And so we had them do some analytics for us and really understand what kind of things we look at. And they're now in a revenue operations role running their own RevOps department. So I think, seeing someone be proactive and while that role didn't exist in that company, because that company had very specific silos of marketing, sales, and service operations, and it was never going to change. This was a billion-dollar company that was very set in its ways. So I think in the future, though, about having those examples to talk to when you're interviewing for a RevOps role, because one thing I'll say is that any of those three backgrounds can get you an interview for a RevOps role, but you have to be able to sing the song during the interview to talk about your experience in those other areas, whether it's been under your purview or not. So I think having those stories, running some cycles alongside your partners on the other type of ops is important. Emerson, anything to add to that?
I mean, I think that's exactly right. I think, we're all ego-based, and I think sometimes in sales and in business, we see a lot of egos. And so, I'm a firm believer that a great way to get ahead is to really support other people in their goals and succeeding. And then also another important piece of RevOps is being able to identify friction and then coming up with creative and effective solutions for it. So if you're in one particular role and you see friction in another part of the funnel, strategize some ways to, some solutions for that, offer your assistance. And I think being able to do that in a way that doesn't trigger egos, that doesn't trigger defensiveness and like, you don't know what you're doing, CS, like, let me solve your problem from a marketing standpoint. But and then as you get into those interviews and you can speak to your experience to like work across the aisle without triggering, that's a super important piece to this whole formula.
I love how you guys are very like sort of careful with the egos and things, because I've been in situations like that. No, but I'm sorry. I've been in situations like that where I identify issues because I have a tendency of seeing all of the issues, which is a challenge and also an opportunity for this role, right? So I see all the issues across the entire customer lifecycle, and I know that there are leaders over here that all run their departments and think they're doing the best they can, right? And my frustration will come when I will come back to one of the leaders and say, look, there is an issue here. Give me, 10 hours of work and I will fix it and come up with a solution. And I will just train your team on it and then we will fix it. And if they say no because of ego, I will just go to the CEO. I don't have the same approach. I understand and I didn't have the same approach when I was junior either, because I don't know, God complex, whatever. So for me, because the end goal of the company is to make more money with satisfied customers. So if the leader in the small leader within the organization can't see that as a benefit for his department doing better, then I will go above him. And this is something that might work for you. It depends on what personality you have and who is the actual leader of the company. But there are moments where if we see a solution that we believe in, I don't think we should be too careful with just saying, I can help you fix this. It will look good on your numbers. And if they don't want to fix it, then we should maybe try going to the CEO. Just a thought.
Yeah, and I think and I think it not only depends on your personality, but also the personalities of those around you. Because you can really burn bridges if you go too forcefully, or you jump people and say, I'm going to go to the CEO, get you in trouble with your boss. So I think that's a consideration to make, is that sometimes you've got to play nice in the sandbox to be able to in certain organizations. And I will say I've worked for different organizations where like my approach of like calling up the CEO or shooting him a text on a Saturday worked great. But then there's other companies that, I would probably find myself on the street if I did that too many times.
Yeah,
so
it's a risk to be willing to take, or sometimes you shouldn't take it. It depends on the situation. I agree. I'm just saying that there are different ways to achieve the same goal, because once you go over, my experience at least is that suddenly you have more mandate to do things. And then you can start building into RevOps if you want. So this is obviously we need to consider people around us to a certain extent.
So we have a couple questions in the chat I want to jump to. We have a question that says, I appreciate that this is a community of self-learners. What are some of the podcasts, YouTube videos, courses, et cetera, that folks have used to learn and grow in RevOps? And this was actually one of the questions we were addressing later in the podcast. So Emerson, I'm going to turn that over to you. What are some of your top resources?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many out there. One of my favorites, Winning by Design, Jocko van der Kooi. He put out a great book recently, Revenue Architecture, but really anything from Winning by Design. They have a YouTube series. Really love that. I think there's a lot of voices on LinkedIn. You know, I think LinkedIn has its moments. Sometimes, you know, there are some good voices out there, and I'll put together a list of resources to share on RevGenius if folks are in there, just with some educational resources. But I'm trying to think of some other. I just relied so heavily on Winning by Design, honestly.
Well, and I will say, Emerson, you actually touched on it earlier, the communities. I think that's a really important aspect. I mean, when I've had a challenge in the past, I have put it out to different groups that are RevOps focused and said, hey, this is a challenge I'm having. Who's experienced it before? And you can get a little bit more experience and response that way. But I think education, the other piece of it that is often neglected, because a lot of the content that's out there for RevOps people is conceptual, right? It's talking about strategy and things like that. Don't lose track of new technology, because there's a ton of new technologies that are out there. And what we're seeing is, before there was a ton of point solutions, and now you're seeing from a revenue operations perspective, they've acknowledged the need for the systems to be connected, as opposed to being different point systems and all connected through a bunch of messy API connections. So that's something. But anything else, Emerson, to add?
You know, I don't want to jump on the AI train here, but honestly, like ChatGPT is incredibly helpful. I use it on a daily basis. You know, I don't use it for like data analysis or anything like that, though. I do use it for writing code for data analysis. I mean, I think to some degree you need to have a good understanding of like core analysis, core RevOps, but you know, don't be afraid to use that as a tool in your toolkit. And then, I think, you know, CRM is kind of central to, it's a central tool to revenue operations. And there's multiple, you know, forums, groups dedicated to supporting folks in whether they use HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever other CRMs out there. But yeah, that's really great for the tactical hands-on, like, how do I do this specific thing?
Okay. Thank you. And then also, Emerson, if you do want to pull together a list of some of your favorite resources, and, you know, maybe Sarah and I can add and supplement to that. And then we can have RevGenius maybe send it out with the recording, or at least offer to share it. Because I think there's a lot out there. It can be almost overwhelming. So the next question in the chat was, what to do when your management does not involve you in the important changes within the sales process changes or new integration software implementation. It leaves me having to pick up the pieces and figure it out on the go. So Sarah, I'll turn it over to you. I think you're just gonna be like, you know, call the CEO.
No, but I think there's two challenges with the situation this person is in, right? So first of all, you don't have the ears of the people who are making decisions enough. You don't have enough of dialogues behind the scenes outside of group meetings with these people. Secondly, bringing this up as an issue. So I will lose speed if I don't get input on this before it happens. So I need to be part of this group. So first of all, if you have a mandate in a role, you need to be able to execute on your mandate. And if you don't feel like that mandate is being met, that needs to be listed. But I think you should start with the communication with the group members here to get them on your side. Now we're doing the politics again, that I don't love. But get them on your side so that you get this information in the off remote things, not in the group meetings where decisions are being made. And thirdly, determine what goals, what KPIs you have that will be suffering from this, and talk about those. So we have these joint goals that will be suffering unless I am involved. So do you want to make a decision to keep doing this? Because you need to highlight what actually happens for the company related to the KPIs that you're aligned on, if they don't get you involved in this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, and Donato, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but I will say the other thing that's it is deeply concerning that if you are in a RevOps role, that
Yes.
you're not involved in systems and integrations, because ultimately they could be purchasing a product that will never work within their tech stack. I've seen it before. In fact, you end up with shelfware and, oh, we just signed a 3-year contract, so we're going to be paying for this software that you can't even access through your CRM. So I think that I would try and make the point of why it is to their advantage to not necessarily like, look, I don't mean to make the decision for you, but I need to be able to sign off on this and say, yes, this is the timeline with which we can get this integrated, that we can get it working, and this is how it's going to play into the overall processes of the organization, because sometimes software can be a shiny new object. So
and I also think, to add to that, when you do, if you ask that question to get involved, make sure that the first 3 times that they come to you to sign off, that you're quick, because you need to show them that I won't be a roadblocker. I will be an enabler, but I need to be involved. So just show them 3 times that I will be quick in giving you the input you need. Because if you drag it out, they will see that as a roadblocker, and it won't be great.
okay. Thank you. The last question in here that I'm seeing is, how do you work on the perception of the whole company on the RevOps role? As it's often created from scratch, most people don't really know what is the scope and responsibility of RevOps. That's true. And I will say one of the scariest things that I've run into, and here would be my advice, be able to clearly articulate what you view your role to be. So, I mean, I've heard people say my job's to keep the trains running on time. My job is to build the scaffolding on which this building is built. There's any number of ways, and those are very metaphoric, but I think if you can come to and articulate, why are you there? What is the purpose for you wanting to be involved in this decision or this process? I think being able to just have a simple and, you know, to use a sales term, elevator pitch about why you were there, what you view your charter as. And I think that's an important thing to be able to articulate, especially when it's a new role within the organization. And the piece that is, I've seen a lot of people struggle to articulate is, how is RevOps, and I will say in some companies, the RevOps title is owned by sales ops or owned by a different department. So you want to be really careful and clear on what your role is. But I think being able to speak to the difference between why is this revenue operations role giving a nod to the entire customer lifecycle relevant for the organization. So Emerson, any thoughts?
Yeah, sorry, go on, Emerson.
Yeah, I think so. Part of my strategic plan, you know, was essentially writing out what would I do for a company if I were to join a company in a year. Where are they going to be compared to where they are now? And then when I did join a company, you know, that 30, 60, 90-day plan, and then I did a 6-month and a year plan as well. It's like, these are the projects that I'm going to come in and I'm going to be able to execute on. And so from now, you might, you know, forecasting, you might not have accurate forecasting. In a year, you will be able to trust your forecasts because of the work that we've done throughout that year, and really laying the groundwork. And you know, that kind of what Sarah's been saying, you do need to have a backbone when you're in RevOps. Mm-hmm. You need to learn how to play politics. You need to learn how to manage egos, but you need to have a backbone as well. That you need to be able to say, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I can do. This is what this company needs, because a RevOps person, ideally, like, they understand the business probably better than anyone else, because they see the data. They see across the customer journey, across the whole customer journey, more than anybody else. They're not hyper-focused or biased in one specific area, ideally. And so the insights that you're able to bring to the table are useful for the company, and everybody should understand your importance. And it would be concerning, you know, you don't want to be labeled as the CRM admin. You don't want to be you don't want to be left out. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges in RevOps, is moving from tactical to strategic, where you're viewed by the leadership team as a trusted partner. And that's really how I see RevOps. It's like, I am a strategic partner to the heads of the CRO, the heads of each department, the CFO, and, you know, and I'm lucky at my company that they view me that way. And so we can get stuff done.
But I also think that, because part of what you're talking about now is having that trusty advisor role, right? So one of the things that I learned, because I went into a VP role a while back in a company that's never had a VP new business. They've never done new business. They've been in the business for 25 years. And this is very similar to having a role of RevOps where the company doesn't know what that means because they had no idea what new business was. Like, I'm serious, 25 years in the game and they had never done approaching new business at all. So what I did was I clarified my mission statement. This is what I'm here to deliver. And this you can do with the RevOps role too. And then I booked a meeting with all the heads. Half an hour. This is what I'm here to do. I will make you be a hero in your department. This is what I will support you with. This is what I need from you. So just clear the way and identify for yourself, this is what I will deliver. And then go and have, because we have, if we go into like, oh, I'm in RevOps now, but there's no real clear mandate, create that mandate by being clear with the people who you will be working with in what you will help them with, because that will be your role. So when you come into a RevOps role and the company hasn't had any RevOps staff before, and you're supposed to build the department, meaning you have no mandate in the start because you need to prove yourself, right? Book meetings with all the leaders, identify this is what I will do for the company and for your department. This is what I need from you and this is what I will deliver. And then you will have a much smoother sailing moving forward. But you need to do the before work to identify what exactly am I supposed to do here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, the questions that keep coming in. So well, I think let's go ahead and take them. And Emerson, this one's for you because you actually touched on it a little bit. How do you think AI is going to help early professionals grow in revenue operations?
Yeah, I kind of view it as having like an assistant who will do, I don't know, like some research, some like teaching me. You know, I can work out an Excel formula and spend some time on maybe writing some Python code to do something I need to do, or I can have AI probably cut the time it takes me to do that down into maybe a quarter of the time. So there's that piece. I think people who understand how to leverage it to accomplish things that they want to do, and they don't. I think there's some people who view, Chat GPT, you can dump your data in there and it will give you insights. If you've ever tried that, like you don't want to present anything like that to your board or to your leadership team. Yeah. But I think you can leverage it to, if you understand what you're trying to accomplish and you know your data well enough to know when ChatGPT is wrong, then you can use it to do certain things. I also, it's rapidly advancing so quickly. I think for some maybe predictive analysis, you'll probably start to see. I think RevOps is prime for like artificial intelligence to come in and help pick up some of the slack. My hope is that will allow revenue operations to elevate more easily to strategic, where a lot of the tactical stuff is kind of taken care of, as long as your data is good.
Yeah. And I will say one of the things that I want to call out is that AI has been present in a lot of software for many years. What's unique and new to the world is machine learning, to where that you can actually teach something back to a machine and say, give me the information I want. No, not that way, this way, and give it some learning cues. So I think the machine learning is really kind of, everyone's saying AI, but we've had these kind of pseudo AI engines in, revenue insight tools and different things like that. Those have been in existence for years, but this machine learning is what's really cool. And I think going to cause a lot of innovation. And to, when we do data analytics, we're looking for pattern recognition. There's nothing better at pattern recognition than machine learning AI. So, okay, gosh, we have so many questions, you guys. So my company has individual ops teams, sales ops, CS ops, et cetera, and a new RevOps manager comes in. How can I use this opportunity to learn, considering that I own and built most of the systems and processes from a sales side? What does success look like here? Sarah, do you want to take that one?
I think I need a minute because that's complicated. What does success look like?
My advice to you, and just from the initial impression, and obviously there's just based on your question, there's probably about 15 layers deep we could talk about this.
Yeah.
But what I'll say is that be a partner. help them understand the existing systems. A lot of times when a new leader comes in, their best friend is the person that helps train them. Because when I came into an 80-person operations org at a company, and my best friend was the person that said, great, I'm going to teach you everything that exists today before you start making changes. And it was a wonderful thing for me to have, because it helped me get on my feet a lot faster. So Sarah, you had a minute. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, but that was actually a really, really good suggestion, because I think just mapping out all the things that you can teach this person will be very beneficial to learn from and to get close to the new RevOps personnel that's coming in. But if you're on the sales side, then maybe collab with the other departments and say, look, shouldn't we go in and do a really good onboarding session with this person if we all bring in the people who know the best to sort of introduce them to all of the processes, not just yours? So you become the spider of the net to collaborate between these sections to sort of teach this new person, if the RevOps person is someone that you want to be close to, because obviously they're going to support you a lot. So that would be my recommendation, to add to the sort of present your things and teach them things. Be the tying knot between the other departments too, and talk to the people who know the things you know in sales in the other departments, and collaborate back into the RevOps person. Because again, it's a joint effort, right? So that would be my recommendation too. But again, this is it's a big scope to sort of
right?
cover.
Like this is the one we can drop.
You can connect on LinkedIn with us all, and you can ask us individually, and we can give you novellas.
Emerson, anything to add to that one?
Oh, no, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. Jared from Rev Genius, he always says, if you want to be successful in your career, be a homie. And I think that kind of sums it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So he is the ultimate homie. I will tell you that.
Yeah.
So this is a really good question, because I think it's something where I think, Sarah, you being the bold person that you are, I would love to hear your answer to this too. How do you find a RevOps mentor outside of your own company? I'd love to get a different perspective on career growth, challenges, et cetera, from someone not so intertwined in the day-to-day of our org. So I'm going to first start with Emerson, because I know Sarah is going to be like, just start knocking on doors. Emerson, what would you say? How would you recommend they identify a mentor?
Yeah, I mean, I think asking goes a long way. Put yourself out there and say that you're looking for a mentor in RevOps. There's a ton of people out there who want to be helpful, who want to pass on their knowledge. A lot of knowledgeable people. Rev Genius is where I found my mentor. It's a great place to go and ask. I think for me, that's what worked.
Okay, Sarah.
Good. Yes. So identify 10 people on LinkedIn that are high enough in their organizations for having mandate and knowledge and been through the couple of years that you need as a background to do RevOps well, who are in a RevOps role. Connect to all 10 of them. Say, hey, look, I'm looking to create a brain trust with 5 to 7 people who all work in revenue operations in different companies, to have a place, to discuss these questions. And then you create a WhatsApp group for the people who say yes. And then within that space, you don't get access to one mentor, you get access to 5 to 7. And something you need to realize is that they also need mentors. They also need people to bounce this off with, because my experience of RevOps and other communities on Slack and stuff is that it's too much information. So a lot of things get lost. So you can ask a question and one person responds. So if you have a brain trust in WhatsApp, you can just ask your question and people will engage, because you're just 5 to 7 people and they all want to know the answers to whatever questions is being popped in there, because most of them don't know either. So create a small brain trust with a group of people that you don't know from before, but that have the role, because they will use each other. So you create value for all of them while you're creating value for yourself. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I think that's a good nod. I mean, in fact, I had this conversation with Jared the other day about smaller communities can sometimes be more powerful, right? Because there's an obligation feeling. Like I belong to a couple groups where there's like 2,000 people that are members of this group. When someone puts a question, I'm like, oh, I have a good answer for that. But I know that 15 other people are going to dogpile on it. I don't stress about it. So one of the things I'll say is whenever you leave a company, when we are at a company, we spend a lot of time building their brand. You need to really focus on your personal brand as well. And one of the things I'll say is that don't lose track of the people that are mentors in your roles just because you leave a company. One of my greatest mentors is someone who was my operational advisor with a private equity firm of a company that I worked with in the past. And I absolutely try to maintain those relationships. In addition, I've had people just hit me up on LinkedIn. Hey, I'm trying to grow. And if I have the capacity, I think for those of us that are in more senior RevOps roles, that seeing these people that are trying to climb, we absolutely will. If we have capacity in our day. So don't be afraid to ask people to be mentored. That said, my dance card is unfortunately full right now. So don't start hitting me up right now because I am
no, but the thing is, that's the thing. Your dance card is full, but being in a WhatsApp group with 5 other leaders, you would probably not say no to. So this is the thing, right? That's what I mean.
Absolutely. Well, and I will say that even just people that I've been on webinars with, communities, like you build a relationship, and like I know I could call up Emerson or Sarah and say, hey, I'm having this challenge. What do you think? And they become not necessarily like long-term mentors for me, but they become partners to me. And I will say that I see a lot more benefit in partnerships than I do just in straight mentoring relationships, sometimes, at least for me personally. So there's a question in here about looking for a RevOps role, sales manager in the mobile digital advertising, staying local, LinkedIn served up very few leads. Any suggestions? I would say networking, right? Like reach out to people and ask them who they know. Because that's ultimately where you're going to find recommendations. In fact, I did this the other day. I had I reached out to a group I belong to and said, hey, who do you know that's really phenomenal in this area? And I got 15 different recommendations. And then I just started calling them. I started calling them and saying, hey, what are you doing right now? Can we talk? To try and help one of my clients find someone for a role. So, and we have a couple more questions. So I'm gonna rapid fire because we only have 4 minutes left. It says, I find that those sales ops, RevOps worlds are typically based off of identifying company-specific opportunities / friction. That being said, what do you think are some of the foundational areas of focus / skills one can proactively nail to join the role? Emerson, do you want to start with that one?
I mean, I think understanding data is really important. Because if you can understand, I mean, you have to have good, clean data to be able to then build insights off that data. So having a good understanding of that's a good place to start.
Yeah, and I think overall the issues or the friction that we're talking about, they're very similar in most companies.
Yeah.
So that I think is an overarching problem, right? So the frictions between departments and silos and teams, right? So understanding what those typical, like what are the signs in the organization that these frictions are a problem? To know what the signs are will guide you to where you should focus your efforts. And then you also have to weigh that towards what is the best benefit? How much can we improve? What's the low-hanging fruit, especially if you're new in the role? Because you need to do some quick wins in the start.
And look at the handoffs. Those are usually where you're going to immediately see some obvious friction. Marketing, sales,
Yeah, and I will say the foundational understanding of things, understanding of systems and tools, understanding of SaaS in general, understanding the customer lifecycle within SaaS. And I'm very SaaS focused, so there's probably a huge use case for non-SaaS software businesses out there. But understand that customer lifecycle, how you get leads, how they become opportunities, how they become customers, all the way through to renewal and expansion. Change management. I can't say that loud and clear. You need to work on your change management skills as a sales operations or revenue operations or any operations person. If you can't change manage, you will struggle, because that is ultimately, you've got to change the people's minds. You've got to change the systems. You've got to make people confident that you have a plan. And then the one that Sarah has hit on, ability to challenge the status quo. Just because it's what we did yesterday doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do. Being able to challenge the status quo. So those are kind of some hard skills and soft skills that can really help from a foundational standpoint, regardless of what the friction is within your organization. So we are, within 2 minutes of time. Thank you so much for all of the interaction and questions. Sarah and Emerson, you've been brilliant. I really appreciate it. And I don't know, Praga, if you want to jump on and close us out, or if we are just good to say goodbye and thank you to everybody.
It's coming. Yay.
Thank you so much. Yes, this was almost in the end pretty racing because it was super quick and rapid. What I will do is, if any of your questions have not been answered and you really want answers to them, just hit me up and I'll try to gather the answers from the panel and try to answer it up in the email that I will send as a recap along with the recording. Thank you so much, Lisa, Emerson, and Sarah. Loved this session, and also the fact that we had very different views on a topic that is close to our hearts. Once again, thank you so much, the audience, and good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.